Welcome to the Alex Jones Show on this August 12th, 2010 edition. Alex is away today working on a project, so I'll be sitting in for the first hour. Some of you may know me. I'm Paul Joseph Watson, the writer and editor for prisonplanet.com, and we will be going to your calls at the bottom of the hour, so get ready. And the number is 800-259-9231. That's 800-259-9231. But in the meantime, we're going to hit on a number of topics, primarily, of course, the financial meltdown, the double dip recession / depression, and more importantly, how the collapse of the political dynasty of Barack H. Obama and the build-up of tensions with Iran are all intersecting at the same time, leading to the same ominous conclusion that we'll discuss shortly. Now, we're going to start, obviously, with the financial picture. The Dow Jones is down again today. It lost no less than 265 points yesterday, and the latest job news, which came out today, is that jobless claims are unexpectedly rising. This is out of the Associated Press. Jobs picture dims as unemployment claims rise. The employment picture is looking bleaker as applications for jobless benefits rose last week to the highest level in almost 6 months. It's a sign that hiring is weak and employers are still cutting their staffs. Now, of course, this is being billed as a surprise that it was unexpected that jobless claims would rise again. And, of course, that was all coming from the happy-clappy, robust recovery crowd who told us that everything was hunky-dory, when, in fact, as Alex Jones, Gerald Celente, all of us here at prisonplanet.com and Infowars.com have predicted from the very start, this was a sucker's rally. If you put your money in to the stock market 10 years ago, it was at 10,000. Now it's a little bit over 10,000. So if you account for inflation, then you've lost money. And once again, this so-called robust recovery has turned out to be nothing of the kind. GDP figures are being revised downward on an almost daily basis. The jobs picture is getting worse. The housing picture is getting worse. And people like Alex Jones and Celente, again, proven right from the very beginning when they said that this was a fake recovery. And now CNN has followed in the footsteps of the New York Times in calling this what it is. I mean, it's becoming so brazenly obvious that they're having to state exactly what it is. And it's the onset of another collapse. CNN article today, is this finally the economic collapse? And following on from the New York Times' David Krugman, who back in June wrote that the United States was entering, quote, the third Great Depression, which would be similar to the Long Depression of the 19th century. Today, CNN and Keith McCullough warns that the Federal Reserve's announcement yesterday that it will start buying Treasury debt is a crossing the Rubicon moment for the economic decline of America. And in this article, he says that this action by the Federal Reserve, basically printing more money out of thin air, QE2 as it were, quote, could lead the country to the brink of collapse. And that's not Celente, that's not Mark Faber, that's not Alex Jones, that's out of CNN saying that the Federal Reserve is bringing America to the point of collapse. And the jobs numbers out today only back that up furthermore. Now, of course, whether the sodium fluoride heads who get angry about the fact that they can't have chicken McNuggets for their breakfast will finally start to realise what's going on now that CNN and the New York Times are saying the same things as us remains to be seen. And we'll explore this further after the break on The Alex Jones Show. Stay with us. Now, we're talking about the economy. Jobless claims are the highest since February. The robust recovery is out to be exactly as we said it would be all along, which was complete hot air. The stock market rise was a sucker's rally. And now that the phony life support system of quantitative easing is being switched off, the very same problems that caused the economic crisis in the first place are now coming back with a vengeance. And so what's the solution from the Federal Reserve? Of course, QE2, more printing money out of fresh air. Helicopter Ben simply going to turn the printing presses back on and lend the money back to the US government interest, and you, the taxpayer, you're going to pay for it. The debt increases, the underlying problems remain, but the Federal Reserve continues to make record profits, and that's really what matters, isn't it? $20 billion in interest, and that's your tax money, just last month alone. The US government in July alone paid $20 billion in interest on the US debt. And of course that goes straight to the Federal Reserve, only 20% of which they give back to the Treasury. So where's the motivation to fix the economy? The Federal Reserve has hijacked the crisis. They're making vast profits, record profits, off the money they print, which they then get the interest back from the US government. And lo and behold, they're now proposing to do more of the same. We're talking about QE2. And of course, as the Associated Press reports today, the majority of that bailout money goes straight to foreign banks in France and Germany. It doesn't go to your local bank. It doesn't even go to massive American banks. The majority of it goes to offshore banks, which of course is the central bankers looking after each other, slapping each other on the back as they exploit this economic crisis that they created to look after each other's interests, as they loot trillions from the taxpayer. And now with QE2, as the Federal Reserve announced yesterday, we're set for a new, fresh round of raping. Even as the austerity measures come in, even as the income tax goes up, the sales tax goes up, it's going up to 20% VAT here in the UK after January 1st. That's 20% extra on every purchase you make on most items. The council tax is going up, the property tax is going up. We're being forced to pay for this, and all the money is going directly to French and German banks. So now the Federal Reserve says that the initial 700 billion, which of course with the rest of the commitments afterwards amounted to over 23 trillion, is not enough. And we're going to need some more to save America from this economic crisis. But of course, as CNN admits today, the Federal Reserve's own policies are what is bringing America, quote, to the brink of collapse. And what will this collapse look like in its aftermath? Well, just listen to what people like Mark Farber have to say about where all this is heading. You know, never mind civil unrest and food riots. Farber is talking about a Mad Max type scenario, you know, every man for himself. And I mean, we can learn from this because implicit within the warnings are what we need to do as solutions to protect ourselves from what could happen if the very worst comes to pass, which is what Farber is saying. And this is what he said in an interview just a couple of days ago. He says, buy a farm you can tend to yourself out in the boondocks and protect it with high voltage fences, barbed wire, booby traps, military weapons, and Dobermans. And of course, that's the same rhetoric as another investment advisor, Anthony Fry, told CNBC back in June. He said people should concern themselves with buying guns, land, and barbed wire. Now, these people are on CNBC and CNN saying this. This isn't some obscure late-night radio talk show saying this. So why are they telling us to buy land? Well, it's because the US dollar is being devalued out of existence. Just look at the chart since the beginning of June against the euro and the pound. The US dollar is going straight down, it's heading south in a hurry. And that's because the globalists, of course, are trying to undermine confidence in the dollar because they want to replace it with a new world reserve currency, which is this banker IMF global monetary unit that we've documented and that they've publicly pronounced they aim to bring into existence. So to do so, they need to undermine the US dollar, which of course is being done through Bernanke again announcing that the printing presses are going to be turned back on, QE2. We're going to have hyperinflation of the US dollar, and that spells food inflation. And of course, when food becomes too expensive, people are going to go hungry unless they have their own self-sufficient, sustainable source of food, which is why we encourage people to buy storable food. But not only that, you need land for growing food, which is why Farber and Anthony Fry and all these top investment analysts are saying, you know, the wisest investment to make in these times is land, which of course can be used for both growing food via, you know, allotments and vegetable patches, as well as keeping livestock. So if the food riots begin, which London Independent last week reported that food riots could be a consequence of spiralling food inflation, then you're going to need to protect this land. So that's why they're saying not only do you need land, you need barbed wire, you need force, you need guns, you need dogs to protect it. And I'm aware of how apocalyptic this all sounds. And 10 years ago, this kind of run for the hills rhetoric, you know, was confined to these obscure late-night talk shows, as I said before. Well, I only have the world's leading investment experts, along with the New York Times and CNN, saying the same thing. Then, you know, it's time to prick up our ears and start to take notice of what they're saying. Because food inflation is already skyrocketing. We have the situation in Russia and Ukraine as well, threatening to do the same with these fires, blocking exports of wheat, which caused in Russia food inflation to skyrocket by 19% in just 1 week, because they blocked exports of wheat. And remember, Lenin said that, you know, grain was the go-to currency. This is going to cause food prices to skyrocket. The London Independent wrote that this, allied with other drastic weather conditions across the world, the floods in Pakistan, similar conditions in Brazil and Colombia, which is stopping them from exporting the cocoa beans and the coffee, was leading towards, quote, an inflationary time bomb that threatens to further devastate Western economies, reduce our living standards, while threatening the very lives of those in the third world. Because in places like Haiti and Pakistan and places like that, people are, the veneer of civilization is very thin. People are very close to death if food so much as rises by 19%, as happened in Russia this week. So the threat of food inflation is obviously something we need to be aware of. But obviously, most people can't afford to follow the advice of these investment analysts. Most people can't afford to buy a farm. They can't afford to buy, even rent an allotment to grow vegetables on. So the solution is, you know, to do it in a group, whether that be to invest in land with your family or in a group with your friends and neighbours as a kind of old-fashioned cooperative. But being independent in terms of food and self-sufficiency is going to be a major advantage in the coming years if the situation gets anywhere near as bad as what these people are predicting. And, you know, even if everything's hunky-dory, then at least you'll learn some new skills and you'll become more independent, which is never a bad thing. So I think it's a good idea to follow the advice of Mark Farber and Anthony Fry and people like this, Gerald Celente. Because even if things aren't as bad as we're told could happen, and bear in mind that now CNN and New York Times are saying this, then at least you'll become more self-sufficient and you'll learn more skills. So educating yourself about, you know, growing vegetables, investing in storable food, things like this, it can only be beneficial even if the crisis doesn't get out of hand, which many are predicting it now will. You know, even just get a chicken coop and have your own chickens and eggs. I mean, even that's going to be a help, and it's going to save you money anyway. So, you know, where's the downside? All you need is a little parcel of land. So I say follow the advice, buy land, and become self-sufficient, become independent, especially with your food, because that's going to be key in the coming years.